Okay, so in this next section, what I want to do is go over what exactly will kill off all those probiotics and those good bugs. Before I do that, there was one quick YouTube clip that I wanted to show you last time that I totally forgot about, but it's a really good overview of what the probiotics do, and it even adds some elements there that I perhaps didn't discuss. So let me really quickly bring you guys over there. Now, how do I bring this on top? I want this to go on top.
Just 100 years ago, most of the food we ate was unprocessed and locally grown. But over the years, we've industrialized, pasteurized, sanitized, and processed our food supply, stripping our food of its best natural benefits. This change has had a dramatic effect on our bodies, especially our gastrointestinal tract, which is home to both good and bad bacteria that are constantly at work. In fact, approximately 10% of a person's body weight is bacteria. The good bacteria, probiotics, play an essential role in our digestive, metabolic, and immune functions. They produce enzymes that break down food, regulate vitamin and nutrient uptake, and convert sugars into essential nutrients. Good bacteria are also the first line of defense for our immune system, blocking toxins, breaking down allergy-causing proteins, and crowding out harmful bacteria and yeast. In fact, 70 to 80% of our immune system resides in our gut. When you have enough of the good bacteria working hard, your digestive, metabolic, and immune functions chug along, and you feel your body is working to keep you healthy, digesting food, fighting infection, and keeping you with a bounce in your step. If you don't supply your body with enough good bacteria, the bad bacteria will take over, and you may suffer from a broad range of issues like diarrhea, constipation, gas, inflammation, food allergies, fatigue, and irritability. It's no wonder we're taking more pills, being sold more vitamins, and running for antacids after every rich meal. We've processed the good guys right out of our food. It's time we take care of ourselves and get healthier, not by
Okay, so I did stop that a little bit soon because it goes into a bit of an advertisement too for a certain type of probiotics, but it is a really good overview as to the function of probiotics and some of why we're seeing a lack of probiotics today. It mentioned our food industrialization, the processing of it, the pasteurization of milk. Foods used to have a good amount of naturally occurring probiotics. Today, you literally have to take probiotics in a pill form if you want to get them, because they have been processed right out of our food. So this really does beg the question, how do you kill off? If we know that the probiotics are so good for us and should be in our gut, how do you kill them off? Because the thing about it is that most Americans do not have adequate probiotics in their gut. We are suffering from a deficiency in probiotics, and as a result, we're seeing a lot of different health conditions. We'll talk about those next time as to which ones specifically are a direct result of not enough good bacteria. But one thing I will mention is that in my line of work, often I start out with most clients with rebuilding their probiotics. And in many people, you do see drastic improvements in health conditions just simply by putting the probiotics back in their gut again. That is how much good they do. So let's real quickly go into taking a look at what kills them off in the first place. Why don't we have enough in our gut like what we should? One of the top reasons why, and this one is a hard one to control, is stress. One thing that you have to understand is that when you are under a lot of stress, and it might not be a initial stressful time period, but just simply a chronic state of stress, which most college students are. You're busy, you might be working, you're trying to study, you might have a family. Stress is a big part of the American lifestyle. However, it is not to our benefit. And one of the reasons why is that stress does kill off probiotics in the gut. How it does that is that when you are under a lot of stress, your adrenal glands create a hormone called cortisol. Cortisol will start to circulate throughout your body, and as it circulates throughout the body, it will also circulate throughout the villi. When cortisol, the hormone, circulates through the villi, cortisol is a very damaging type of a hormone. That because of that, oftentimes in your body, you want cortisol to have, you want a burst of it to deal with a temporary situation like a fight and flight response when your heartbeat raises, um, and you just get that quick high. That is a result of a lot of cortisol. But when you're under a low amount of stress, you have low doses of cortisol. It might not be enough to create that heartbeat effect or the drastic effects that you see if you're, say, you just missed a car accident or something like that. But it still is the same hormone. And we don't want it running around our bodies chronically because it has one purpose. And if it's left in the bloodstream, it damages the cells that it's around. So this happens in the gut too. If cortisol is left to circulate in your villi, it will eventually kill off the probiotics. And a lot of people who are under stress all the time end up with very few probiotics left in their gut. Another really big problem in America is drugs, particularly antibiotics. And I'm going to give you a little bit of an analogy here. Antibiotics work a lot like a weed killer. So let's say you have a lawn and it's full of weeds. In the gut, or in relation to the gut, the weeds would be like yeast. And we all have a certain amount of yeast. We just usually we keep it at bay because we have enough good probiotics that are restricting its growth. But let's say you have a big old lawn, there's a lot of weeds in it. You decide to go get a lawn killer, or a weed killer. So you buy a weed killer and you spray it over your entire lawn. But let's say you overdosed and you accidentally sprayed too much weed killer all over your lawn. So now your lawn is pretty much a plot of dirt. And if you just were to leave the dirt, the very first thing to start growing back would be the weeds, right? So instead, you have to replant the grass and allow the grass to come up first, and then it will crowd out the weeds so the weeds don't come back. The same exact thing happens in your gut when you take antibiotics. The antibiotics kill off everything. It kills off the bad bacteria and it kills off the probiotics. So you're left with pretty much a sterile gut. So if you just leave yourself then and you don't feed back the probiotics, then what happens is the yeast starts growing right away. And then it literally colonizes to such a degree to where the probiotics don't even have a chance anymore. So when Americans take doses of antibiotics, one right after another, or even say up to about 3 or 4 times a year, that is enough to efficiently kill off all of your probiotics, and they do not have a chance to grow back again. This happens a lot in children too, because we're giving so many antibiotics to kids for ear infections and other infections. Children are growing up with virtually no probiotics in their guts, and it is having an impact on learning and behavior. The next thing you'll see down below is food allergens. When you do not have adequate probiotics in your gut, what we will see later on in the next section is that they literally will start tearing apart your villi. Undigested food will come in and it can literally tear apart those cells, and then it gets into your bloodstream. When undigested food gets in your bloodstream, a lot of times these are big particles of protein like casein and gluten and other things like that. So when those things go in, interestingly, they can circulate and they can even cross over your blood-brain barrier. So when things like gluten passes through to your blood-brain barrier, or your blood-brain barrier, then usually what would happen is it can hook onto certain receptors within the brain that it doesn't typically hook onto, and it can stimulate those receptors. And therefore, we're starting to experience a lot of different mental conditions, and this is why undigested food and food allergies also affect behavior and learning in children. Again, it does the same thing. It hooks onto their brain receptors and starts creating a response. That response might be hyperactivity. It might be a lack of good memory, a lack of good recall. Hyperactivity is really a big one, especially in kids, though. In adults, a lot of times, if a gluten molecule or undigested wheat gets into the brain, then it creates a bit of a high, like an opiate type of a high. And so then we want more and more and more of that thing, but all we're craving is undigested food thrown into our bloodstream and connecting to our brain. We are looking at other things eventually that we'll talk about, other mental conditions that are a result of allowing undigested food into the blood as well. But I'm kind of getting off track there. Processed foods. Okay, we saw this a little bit in the video. Processed foods have killed off the good bacteria. Probiotics are live, so as soon as you expose them to a lot of heat or a lot of pressure, you're going to kill them. So processed foods naturally cannot have any probiotics in them because probiotics have to be live. A lack of fiber. This is a really big one in our diets. Probiotics feed off of fiber. So if you want to feed your probiotics, you're going to eat a lot of fiber. In the standard American diet, our food is lacking in fiber because we have stripped the grain and stripped the fiber. We don't tend to add fiber back in. Also, beans are another big source of fiber, and many Americans don't eat beans anymore, or legumes. Then you get rid of the whole grains, you get rid of the vegetables. You've pretty much eliminated all the fibrous foods from our diet. So we're not able to feed our probiotics. So even if Americans start out with a good amount, if they're not being fed, then we're going to kill them off anyways. This is a biggie, the high sugar intake. Sugar feeds your bad bacteria and your yeast. So let's say you're eating a diet that does not have a lot of fiber, but it does have a lot of sugar. This would be the very standard American diet. You are feeding your yeast and bad bacteria, but you are starving your probiotics. What happens over time is your probiotics will die off because you're not feeding them, and you've just given your yeast and your bad bacteria in your gut a good foothold, and they will start growing and taking over the entire environment. This is one of the biggest reasons why Americans don't have adequate probiotics. We have a very high sugar diet, so we love feeding our yeast. Environmental toxins and food toxins both can begin to kill off probiotics if you get enough of the chemical fertilizers, the herbicides, the pesticides in your fruits and vegetables even. If you get enough of those in your gut, they will kill off the probiotics as well, just like the pesticides kill off normal bugs. And last, a poor start during birth. This has been a generational thing. In past generations, when we didn't eat so many refined foods, infants would get their first dose of probiotics. They still do. Infants get their first dose of probiotics from their moms, but moms in the past had adequate probiotics to give. Nowadays, because the girls growing up in this generation do not have, that we have diets that don't supply probiotics, and they're actually killing off the probiotics. What happens is many girls today don't have enough in their bodies. Where the baby gets its first dose of probiotics is when it goes through the birth canal. It gets a good old dose in its mouth, and that's the start for the probiotics in its gut. Up until that point in time, an infant's gut is completely sterile. So if mom doesn't have a lot to give, the baby's not going to get any. The other issue is that many women are having C-sections nowadays. If a baby is born via C-section, then it doesn't have a chance to get the probiotics either. The second way that an infant gets probiotics is through breastfeeding. So again, if mom doesn't have enough to give, she can't pass them along to her baby. But also, if a baby is formula fed, it doesn't get probiotics. So if a baby's born first via C-section and then it's formula fed, that child grows up not ever having had the proper amount of probiotics to build up the villi in the gut, and hence to build up the immune system, which is the biggest part. So therefore, that child tends to have a very weak immune system, and as they become adults, they experience chronic infections. They get sick very easily. They have yeast infections. There's just a lot of things that go into the fact that they never had adequate probiotics. So even though there's many more things that can kill off probiotics in our guts, these are some of the top ones: the stress, the antibiotics, the food allergens, the processed food, not getting enough fiber, eating way too much sugar, eating a lot of foods with chemical preservatives and pesticides and herbicides,